What's up everyone? So today we'll be talking about the while loop, so let's get straight into it. So before we talk about the while loop, there's one thing I want to show you all. So for example, let's just start I at 0. So I is a variable that stores 0. So if we want to add 1 to I, we already know how to do this. We can just print I plus 1. And then if we execute our code, you see we get 1. But what if we want to add 1 to I? Then to do that, instead of just printing I, we'll set I equal to I plus 1. And then we can just print I. Because now I has actually been incremented by 1. And now if we rerun our code, we get the same output. So a better way to do this is to use the plus equals operator. And so that would look something like this. We can say I plus equals 1. Line 4 is equivalent to line 5. So if you see the plus equals operator, just know that it's adding that number to the variable. So just to show you that this works, we'll print our output. And this is going to give us 2 because I starts at 0, and then we increment I by 1, and then we increment it one more time. So I is going to be 2 by the time we print I. So you see we get 2 in the output. So now that you all are familiar with the plus equals operator, let's talk about while loops. So with the while loop, we can execute a set of statements until a certain condition is met. So going back to our earlier example where we have I is equal to 0. So just say that we wanted to add 1 to I until I is, say, 10. So we can use a while loop to do this, because if we were just trying to add 1 to I until I equals 10, then that would look something like this. It'd be like, so if we were doing it this way, we'd have to have 10 statements just like this until I is 10. But so obviously that's not very practical, so we can use a while loop to increment I until it reaches 10. So let me just show you the notation of a while loop. So you first start out by saying while, and then you follow it with your condition. In this case, our condition would be while I is less than 10. And then we follow that with a colon, and then on the next line you have to indent 4 spaces. Just like with the if statement, anything underneath the indentation will be specific for the while loop. So any code that's going to be indented under this while loop is specific for this loop. So in this case, we'll say I plus equals 1, and that's all that we have to do. So this while loop is going to add 1 to I until this condition is met. So then after our loop, we'll just print out I just to make sure it's all working, and then we'll run our code, and you see we get 10 in the output. So it's essentially adding 1 to I until I is equal to 10, because then once I is equal to 10, then this statement will equate to false, and so our loop will stop. Our loop will stop as soon as our condition is false. It's really important that your condition equates to false eventually, because if it doesn't, then you'll be stuck in what's called an infinite loop. An infinite loop happens when your condition never equates to false, so you're stuck inside the loop, and it's just executing those statements forever and ever. And since the condition never equates to false, it's never going to break out of the loop. Thankfully, this loop doesn't do that because our condition will equate to false. So make sure that your condition does equate to false, or else you'll be stuck in an infinite loop. And just to show you all, that would look something like this. We could say this, while true, I is equal to that, and then we'll print I inside of our while loop. So on each iteration of our loop, we'll add 1 to I and then print it. And this is never going to equate to false because it's while true, and true will never equate to false. So this is an infinite loop, so it's just going to continuously add 1 to I and print. Just to show you all, if we run our code, you see it's just going to keep doing this forever and ever. Thankfully, if you hit Control-C, then you'll get a keyboard interruption. This is called an infinite loop because it never stops. So make sure that the condition for your while loop will eventually reach false. So the next thing I want to talk about is the break statement in Python. So break is a keyword, and you can use it inside of a loop to break out of the loop. So just an example of this would be, let's just say I is equal to 0, and we'll start our loop by saying while I is, say, less than 10, and then we'll say I plus equals 1. And then we'll print I. So obviously we just did this, but just to show you all again, you see we get numbers 1 through 10. But what if we wanted to break out, say after it's reached 5? So we can use an if statement to do that. We can say if I is equal to 5, then we'll break. So this is just a demonstration of using the break keyword. So once I is equal to 5, break is going to be called, and break just means break out of the loop. So even if the condition is true, we just want to stop. We want to stop the loop if I is 5. So that's what the break keyword does. And just to show you all, if we run our code, you see we just get numbers 1 through 5. Because then once I equals 5, then it's going to run this code. It's going to run break, and then we'll break outside of the loop. So that's what the break keyword does. It's pretty helpful if you want to break out of the loop before your condition is false. So there's another keyword in Python. It's similar to break, but it's continue, and continue will just take you to the next iteration of the loop. So in this case, if I exchange break for continue, then so it's just going to take us to the next iteration of the loop. So just to show you all, if we run our code, and you see we get numbers 1 through 10. But here, let me have the print statement come after this, because this will make it more clear what's actually going on. So you see we get numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we skip 5, and then we get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So why this is happening is because when I reaches 5, then we continue. And so continue just means, alright, just go to the next iteration of the loop. So don't execute anything underneath continue, but just go to the next iteration of the loop. So basically I is 5, and then we just continue. So we don't print, but we just keep looping. And so that's why I goes from 4 to 6 in our print statements, because we don't print it when it's 5, because we continue to the next iteration of the loop. Hopefully that's clear. If it doesn't make sense, feel free to leave some comments and I can further explain it. So that's about it for while loops. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.